Hello, my name is Yito. I am a hobbyist music producer from Slovakia, making music at audiotool.com and am overall just a sound enthusiast and art enthusiast overall, and I plan on making some music reviews here, among other content. I will upload more music to this channel, for example, and so on. Okay, so the reviews themselves will be based mostly on Audio Tool albums or by people who have previously been making music on audiotool.com. I am speaking acloudyskye, Ford, among other people who have brought it quite far at this point. But just in general, Audiotool albums and from producers who have been working on there. Okay, so for the review, I need to say a few things about the rating system. First off, I may be a bit harsh on some productions, but that does not mean you should, but that does not mean or should mean anything to you, the artist. You are supposed to do you. That's how you make good music. And just don't let anyone tell you what your music is supposed to sound like. Understood? But if you find my guidance or some outside perspective helpful and I help, that is what I am planning to achieve with that. And another purpose of these videos would be that I give some people on AudioTool some recognition outside of AudioTool, which is definitely something they would deserve. So, no matter the rating, no matter what I say about it, would be lovely if you're interested in the album, you go listen to it. It would be best if you did it, obviously, for like every single one, but I can't demand that. So, okay, more about the review. Just like school grades, numbers kind of suck at like explaining everything, but since they are convenient and a familiar layout, I will be using those. I, as of right now, don't have like an empiric, as of right now, I don't have empiric measurements or a good system, but maybe roughly said, we'd have like, for example, 5 out of 10 is an average track you hear everywhere. That isn't perhaps too interesting, but also not bad. 10 is an obvious masterpiece. 1 is kind of a little disappointment. 0 is something I would give to an album if there was no effort put into it whatsoever. And my personal equivalent of Fantano's not good would be nope. Very creative, I know. Okay. So I decided to make this more interesting, or not interesting, but to explain this whole system and show it off better. I decided to purposely on my own work. So I randomly picked out some tracks, and that may also seem like a bit of a shameless plug, but this is my channel, and I decide what's going on. It's so shut. Okay. So, I will try to make these reviews as objective as possible, and obviously that is not possible. Make something completely objective if it's based on your opinion. Yeah. Oh, wow, that clipped. I'm sorry. So, okay, I will try to make this as objective as possible. And for any of the artists mentioned, I make plenty of shit music too. So, really, the last thing I would want is for someone to feel discouraged to make anything new in the future. So, in case you have made an album or even an EP. I don't really have anything artistic on Audio to out anywhere just yet, so I have lacked the balls for that until now. So all props go to you. Okay. So anyway, to actually start reviewing things, here are 20 tracks I have made I would like to review. So D3 in part 4. This track is fairly laid back in terms of atmosphere, has a quite mellow melody that feels fairly intentional and meaningful. It doesn't have the cleanest percussion, but the percussion isn't that prevalent, which is good in this case. But some criticism I would definitely give is that the saw chords in the second section sound a bit out of touch and could use a bit of another timbre. And unfortunately, just like most of my things that I make, it is too short and could really be expanded upon. So I would give it a 5 out of 10. D3 in part 9. So this is a meme track with a fairly awfully elaborate structure that I wasted too much time on. But the rhythm of the bruh essentially is fairly fun. The caramel dancing sample in the end is quite dancey, and even though I'd really like to expand on that, yeah, copyright, man, I can't. Anyway, it's overall a goofy sound collage, but no matter how much I would want to bring myself to not like it, I can't. It's catchy. 5 out of 10. Bad Person Anthem. So the sample in Bad Person Anthem is quite choppy, slightly repetitive, and honestly not that interesting. That break underneath is nice rhythmically, but the fillers don't quite add to the atmosphere and just don't fit. The drums seem too loud in comparison to the pad, and the whole track is missing bass, although I don't mind it that much. And since it was trying to recreate another existing track and is not really doing the best job at it, I'll have to say it's a 4 out of 10. Spacey Doodle is a quite old piece for me. The chords and the melody are very atmospheric. I like what I did there. Emotional and make a good compositional basis for the track, which also evolves fairly well, but otherwise the track is really lacking in a lot of aspects. So the mixing isn't great. The chords hit the ceiling a lot and then drop out in terms of phasing. The unfinished drop is where the track loses its compositional magic as well. The idea of this future bass drop is perhaps not really bad itself, but it doesn't add any new elements. The LFO chords are just what came before, the melody is the same, and that honestly makes it a bit for a disappointing experience, which is why I'd give this a 5 out of 10. Captive is more of a joke track again, but this time with a techno flavor and much more elaborate, I'd say. Well, the kick sits in an interesting sonic space, and there's a lot of interesting percussion going on, and what really sells this is the 303 acid bass in the background. Quite catchy. The weird screams and effects of this make it feel really heavy, and the upper delayed lead just adds to the catchiness and flavor of the track. It's heavy and yet melodic, could need a bit more structure, to be honest, and it is a tiny bit too short, but in my honest opinion it's just a slapper. I give it an 8 out of 10. So, one of my most recent tracks, which I submitted to the 3 tonematrix challenge. This is a full track in a sense, quite minimal, with very glitchy filler sections to the main distorted plugs in the background, glitches themselves are quite cool, but they lack direction. And so does the repetitive main distorted melody, to which there are enough changes, however, to keep it interesting. And the glitches themselves aren't entirely all that interesting because they lack direction, but where the glitches get kind of interesting is when they go into the lower end, into the bass of the track, and they kind of sound like drum and bass roller basses, but there's not enough of those, unfortunately. So, and the next section that comes afterwards becomes more melodic and ambient. The section reaches its peak with the slower breakbeat starting at the end, and this makes for a fairly highly atmospheric effect. To me, I'm not all that much of a fan of the track. It is fun, but I find it lacks direction. It's a bit random and uninspired, but since public opinion shows a very different image, I will say 7 out of 10. How Do You Make Colorbase.org is one of the shorter, like 30-minute tracks I've done, or doodles rather, which is fairly wavy. It's a color base doodle, who would have expected. And so even though the modulations in this track are fairly interesting, the chords of the bass just aren't. They don't have a good harmonic center and don't have a good harmony or progression going on, and they sound fairly thin. This whole track is really missing a lot of bass, even in the percussion. So it doesn't really own up to good color bass production, but perhaps it does have some potential. So I give it a 4 out of 10. Okay, for school stuff, so this is one of the earliest tracks I have ever published, and as almost always, it is a short preview. So it has a fairly interesting percussive beat with a jack-u snare, which is what makes this probably the most interesting, and a, for me, quite standard lead, and it has a fairly odd, quiet sub-bass 808 going on in the background. And then this distorted 808, which for some reason sits entirely on for some reason sits entirely on the right channel. So melodically it is perhaps a bit more engaging than my low effort projects, but overall it's not that interesting. I would give it a 5 out of 10. So this cut called House Doodle is, as the title implies, a short house doodle. Wow. With a metallic sounding pluck in the main melody, which is the most interesting part of this track. The melody bounces around a bit, which is nice, changing a bit, and the sound design with the very metallic feel is fun. But otherwise, it isn't interesting, doesn't have any other valuable elements. So I'd give it a 4 out of 10. Okay. Finished 2 super tasks today, and plank length cat physics, which is Viista's 2K remix comp. That's my entry for it. I need to say I always liked this song, but after a more analytical listen, I kind of question why, to be honest. It is a strange combination of house, future bass, and quite free-form jazz with a very free interpretation of the original melody and voluminous super saws in the first part, which among other elements come off as quite chaotic. And in the second plank length cat physics section, we have a more classically jazzy section with a modulating lead and a walking bass, although electronic. So I feel like the track could have been done with a bit more direction, but it is fun and engaging and one of my better tracks for sure. So I'd give it a 7 out of 10. Next on the list I have 2020 Reflections So this progressive house skit has a lot of potential, but it doesn't follow through with it because it is a skit and it's short. So perhaps it uses a lot of elements that are quite typical for me and make it a bit uninteresting in the longer run, but the chords and melody are fairly strong and convey a feeling of hope, in my opinion, and longing. And considering the theme of the track, it proves that point, which is trying to make. So, even though it is unfortunately a bit too short, I give it a 7 out of 10. Okay, repeater. So, my repeater edit is, as many of my remixes, it borrows many elements from the original and only really expands on them partially. It uses a lot of what has already been given, but I mean, that's all remixes. So there are many background elements, but in this one, a lot more additional sounds are added than I usually add. And most of them are ear candy, in my opinion, and those make the track more dense, more interesting, more exciting. So the drop is made bouncy through the rhythmically cut chords that have been in the original, and I extended the percussion, but it doesn't come through in the very dense mixing of A Cloudy Sky. The middle breakdown section has some really nice rhythmic melodies, but there is one really good one, and the other ones don't really expand on that melody. They are in their own lane a tiny bit, and that is, it's not the best, let's say. It could have expanded on what was already given. So in the last section, the additional changes sound a bit forced and perhaps a tiny bit rushed, and still it stands, in my opinion, as one of the best tracks, with the exception that most work has been done by Cloudy Sky. So one of my best tracks. I will give it an 8 out of 10. Okay. B3M Part 3. It's one of the few quite rare reggae tracks on Audio Tool. This one, however, does not really succeed at anything else than being a reggae track. It is fairly uneventful. Sound design isn't the greatest. At least it has some kind of musical center. So I will give it a 3 out of 10. For the mountains, give the mountains take. One of the best qualities about this cut is definitely its odd meter and a dense and yet very light atmosphere, I'd say. It is a quite moody rock inspired track, inspired mostly by Whitefall. I've added in some vocals that expand on or extend the chords, and in this version there are some additional interesting drum fills, interesting drums, and much better mixing. And although it feels a bit empty in parts, that adds to the atmosphere, definitely. So this is definitely one of the more meaningful tracks that I've made. 8 out of 10. Again, I have no idea how I'm going to... Okay, hvd.osc.osc.lfo. Yeah, it's the track name. Anyway. So this is yet another full track simply capitalizing off on someone else's style. This time it is inspired by the relatively simplistic trap music from the artist called hvd on Audio Tool. It gets a bit boring after a while. The synth is extremely loud in the mix. It's just not that great. There are some out of tune but rarely audible 808s going on in the background, and mixing remains a non-existent factor in this case. Although it is musically fun, it doesn't really stand out much otherwise, and yeah, becomes bland, honestly. 5 out of 10. Okay, Salt Lake 2, based on images I have made in Blender, and it focuses a lot on building an atmosphere that was made by the image. And I think it pretty much succeeds at it. Even though I did not like it, I kind of grew into it a bit more. What is great about the track is the synth didgeridoo and a fairly interesting flute synth, even though it is a bit melodically strange. It adds a bit to the atmosphere, but it could have been done maybe a bit more intelligently. So even if it isn't a full work, it is engaging and unique, and I would give it a 7 out of 10 because of that. So 3 dubstep genres with 1 synth. Yeah. So even if this was a long time ago, and I thought I was cool with this one, yeah. No, I was not. Melodically and harmonically, the basses are unmusical, not on beat, and just aren't good. That's a 1 out of 10 for the effort. Okay, to feel okay, this is the only only one orchestral music attempt that really worked for me. I've tried several things in different DAWs, but I haven't gotten anywhere. But this cut worked, and I'm really happy with it. From an outside perspective, I would definitely call this fairly beautiful, and even though it is short and conveys a lot of emotion in this short time, though the sound design is perhaps not entirely accurate to real-life instruments, it gets fairly close and makes sense in the arrangement. The flute is the most dynamic section. The flute in the most dynamic section is very thrilling, and I mean, maybe not thrilling, but emotionally compelling, that's for sure. Still makes me melt a tiny bit. Some mixing could have definitely been done differently, and some sound design too, but this is compositionally something I am and will definitely be in the future quite proud of. So this is a 9 out of 10.
I would give Parasocial, lonely, confused,
a 4 out of 10. Next track I have in the list is Solivagant. So Solivagant is still one of my best tracks. Melodically, I have pretty much peaked here. The lead is very meaningful, very catchy, melancholic perhaps a tiny bit, and that may be because once again I kind of stole that idea, but well, regardless, it's still very valuable, and it conveys a lot of emotion. The counter melodies and the ARP, those elements all go together very well and create a dense, very emotional and very catchy atmosphere, in my opinion. However, it is structurally still quite a bit open and not quite finished, The same goes for the mixing and some of the sound design, the reverb especially. And yet I can still say it is one of the best tracks I have made for sure, but I can still hear where Solivagant has its flaws. Thus, I will give it an 8 out of 10. Okay. Randomly pubbed quirk is the track with the widest kick I have ever heard in my entire life. I don't even need to say more. So, yeah, 2 tracks that are either this dumb and not on purpose, or which have some message or meaning I strongly disagree with. I will give the nope rating.
Yeah. Exactly. The nope rating.
Okay, so thank you for watching this definitely 100% incredibly engaging video that definitely a lot of people are going to watch or want to watch. Haha. Subscribe. Anyway, definitely if you liked the video, leave a thumbs up. Please suggest whatever album there is on Audio Tool. I would really like to review it. Give some people, some artists on there a bit of credit. Leave the suggestions in the comments if you want to. And if you want to hear more music, more reviews from me, hit that subscribe button.
Or I'll take your ears.
Thank you for watching. Bye. Hi, editing Yito here. If this first video kind of sucked, I went into this pretty much unprepared and finished the script pretty much a few minutes before I started recording. So I'm definitely going to take more care of these things in the future. But yeah, thanks. Bye.